It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. I am John Schmeelk, joined by Matthew Citak. We're taking your calls at 201-939-4513. Giants coming off of a off day yesterday. They had a shells practice today. They'll have a padded practice tomorrow before a day off Saturday. Shells on Sunday. Then we have the two big joint practices against the Lions here in East Rutherford next week, which should be a lot of fun. A lot to do on today's show. We'll go through practice. A lot of touchdowns and takeaways in today's practice. So good plays by both the offense and the defense. And we also had the coordinators for the first time during training camp talking to the media before practice began. So a lot to talk about. Greg Van Roten also spoke to the media after practice. We'll talk to you about that. So a lot going on. Get on the line, 201-939-4513. And Matt, just to start practice, we talked about it after Tuesday's practice. It was a little up and down for the offense. They just could not get enough steady completions. It wasn't as in rhythm and pinpoint. I noted that today's practice, 4 straight completions for Daniel Jones to start the day. A nice timed stop route to Darius Slayton where the ball's out of Jones's hands before Slayton even turns around to catch it. Yep. Then a nice little seam route on a seam kind of slant route to Theo Johnson, the rookie tight end, on the following play. So, and we'll get to it. Defense made plays too, but I did think the offense seemed to be more in rhythm to start this practice than they were back on Tuesday.
Oh, yeah. This was a significantly better practice for the offense today, without a doubt. As you mentioned, it started early. Daniel Jones had a couple of nice throws where, as you mentioned, that play to Darius Slayton. By the time Darius turned around, the ball was already pretty much like on him. It was just perfect timing by Daniel. He had a nice throw to Theo Johnson up the seam. But the two big plays were towards the end of practice when he first hit Malik Neighbors deep for about a 40-yard touchdown. And we've seen this consistently through the first week of practice. But the amount of separation that Malik Neighbors gets on almost every single play, but especially when he goes deep, is insane.
I just submitted the written article to Salamone to put up on the website with my practice report, and I said Malik Neighbors found himself wide open on the right sideline. I don't know how else to put it. Daniel Jones didn't even lead him perfectly. He kind of had to slow down to catch it. He still had 2 or 3 yards on the defender to make the catch. And you're right. I mean, we saw that in college, right? We talked about him being a separator, and that's why we all thought Brian Dable would like him as his top wide receiver. And according to Hard Knocks, that's who his top wide receiver was. And I think we've seen that in practice. I'm excited to eventually see him in games use that run after the catch ability, which we haven't seen yet. But the downfield separation has been obvious in spades.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to see on those deep passes 40 yards down the field. But even when he's running short routes, intermediate routes, it is tough for any defensive back on the Giants to keep up with him. And that's not saying anything about the defensive backs. That's just talking about how fast and just explosive Malik is. It cutting in and out of his routes. It's truly something I don't think we've seen on the Giants since Odell Beckham was here.
Oh, yeah, no question. Absolutely. And he also another throw late in practice. This one rolling to his right. There was a little bit of pressure. I thought he actually bailed from the pocket a little bit early on the play to Jones, but he ended up rolling to his right. And Jalen Hyatt separated from somebody. I'm not sure if after the rollout, he did one of those kind of secondary routes, that was an unplanned route on the play. Obviously, without looking back at the tape of the practices, there's no way I'm not watching every route. But he separated down that right sideline as well, and Jones put it up to him, and he kind of got the ball inside the 5-yard line. I think they gave him the touchdown on the play. I think he might have been a little bit short, but it was another downfield big connection between Jones and his 2 speedy wide receivers.
Yeah, I do think he probably would have been tackled somewhere inside the 5-yard line. There's a chance momentum could have carried him into the end zone. But, yeah, that's another play where Jalen Hyatt, and I believe the Giants social team, we posted it onto Twitter, but Jalen Hyatt just puts his hand up in the air to Daniel saying, just lead me, throw the ball down the field. And, yeah, they did post it. And it is going to be just an easy, touchdown or close to touchdown. I believe Kayvon Thibodeau had pressure on the play, which is why Daniel was forced to scramble out of the pocket. It was a good day for Kayvon too. I feel like he got himself into the backfield a decent amount, but we'll stick with the offense for now.
And no pad, so you have to keep that in mind too.
Of course.
On a daily table was just shells.
Yeah, that definitely plays a big factor when we're talking about the matchups between the offensive and defensive lines. But yeah, it was very good to see Daniel just bounce back from Tuesday's practice, because there was no doubt about it. He struggled on Tuesday. It was a rough practice, but he looked significantly better on almost all of his throws. Short, intermediate, deep. He was hitting his receivers on all of these different routes, and it's good to see. I mean, we tend to kind of forget that this guy is still 8 months removed from surgery on a torn ACL, and the way he's playing out there, there are times where he does look a little bit rusty, but for the most part, the way he's moving around the pocket, you would never know that this guy is coming off such a major injury.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about the media later, but both Mike Kafka and Brian Dable were asked today about Daniel Jones and how, maybe some of his passes, he's been a little bit short, throwing it behind some guys and things like that. He said, look, it's just more time on task. It's working on it. It's just doing the reps. He doesn't see anything wrong. Neither guy said they see anything wrong physically with him. That is a physical issue with him getting it out there. They just think keep working it, and they have all the confidence in the world that accuracy will continue to tick up as he continues throughout training camp practice.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it at times in this first week of practice. It hasn't been a, very consistent every single play or every practice sort of thing, but for the most part, Daniel has been pretty accurate on a lot of his throws. Again, it's the first week of training camp. For any quarterback, you can't expect them to be absolutely perfect the first week back. Obviously, there were spring practices, but he didn't even participate in the 11-on-11. So this is still the first week where he's, working the pocket, feeling the pressure from the defense. It's going to take a little bit of time for him to really get back into his normal groove. But he's certainly shown at times, and even more than just at times, a decent amount of the time, he's looked like just the Daniel Jones that we kind of saw in 2022.
Yeah, he's moved around really well. That has not been an issue. I think it just needs to get a little sharper as he gets more, feel more comfortable getting the ball out on time, getting it out there quick, letting go, letting loose on some of these throws, getting his rhythm and his feel for throwing to guys like Hyatt and Neighbors, who he hadn't thrown to a lot before this summer. So all that will come, I think, as we continue forward, as the Giants continue to practice. One other throw I want to touch on before we hit to the defense here, Matt. I thought Drew Lock had a really nice throw to Jack Stoll on a little flag route towards the left sideline. And then Lock also, later in practice, had to roll to his left, which, as fans know, for a righty quarterback can be tough. Got his body back around, hit Isaiah Hodgins in stride going towards the sideline. Hodgins did a good job dragging his back foot and keeping it in bounds.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen a quarterback that enjoys throwing sidearm as much as Drew Lock does.
He likes to drop down. You're absolutely right.
Which sometimes you need to do that, to get the right angle, to get around the defensive line who's got their hands up. But it's just something I've noticed in the first week. But yeah, that throw to Jack Stoll on the sideline especially, that was one of those plays where I turned around to Dan Salamone of Giants.com, and I was like, holy cow, that was just a beautiful pass. I mean,
right over the shoulder, right over the defender. It was just really well placed.
We're going to get into Isaiah Simmons later because he had himself a very strong day.
Why don't you do it right now? Let's get to the defense.
Before we get to that, he was the one in coverage on Jack Stoll in that play, and he had great coverage.
It was good coverage.
But Drew Lock just placed the ball perfectly in between Isaiah and the sideline where Jack Stoll could catch it, get his 2 feet in. Beautiful pass. But let's move over to the defense.
And Isaiah Simmons did make a couple of plays later on in practice.
Certainly did. There were 2 different occasions where Isaiah Simmons dropped back in coverage, got his hands on a ball. One time it looked, we've seen the clip, it looked like he tipped it and then it also hit off of Elijah Riley.
Yes.
The second time it was just Isaiah Simmons that tipped it, but on both of those plays, the ball ended up in defensive back Alex Johnson's hands for interceptions. That happened twice. Isaiah just had very strong coverage throughout practice, and Shane Bowen talked about Isaiah, before practice started, and talking about how they've been, giving him these reps at the nickel corner position, and that he's been playing well. He's really taken strides in this role, which he has played this role at times throughout his young NFL career, but it's not like he's primarily played in this position. Mm-hmm. And Bowen complimented him before practice And then once Isaiah took the field, again, he had great coverage throughout practice, but made a couple of really, really nice plays on the ball.
Yeah, made the point that on early downs he's playing that big nickel spot, and then in later downs he's playing more of that inside linebacker spot. Both, obviously, he's a guy you don't want having to take on blockers in the run game, things like that. You want to move around in space, which is why you use him in those two particular roles. And then there was a third takeaway. In fact, it was the first team defense, second team defense, and third team defense each got one of the three takeaways, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yep.
The final one, it was Bobby Okereke over the middle, got his hand on the ball, knocked it really high up in the air, a good probably 10 feet, comes down right into the hands of Theo Johnson for the interception.
Yeah, that, again, Bobby, another player that looked great today, but on that play in particular, he tipped it so high up, there were about 3 defenders there waiting for the ball to come down for an easy interception. Theo Johnson was the one that was the lucky one to end up getting his hands on it. But that was a great play by Bobby. I don't even think that was his best play of the day. I think his best play came, I believe it was the first team period where he was dropping back in coverage.
First play of the second team period.
Okay.
Remember Jones completed his first 4 practice.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And I don't even remember what tight end he was covering, but it was a ball where he literally jumped full extension up in the air and was able to bat the ball away. Great pass breakup. Again, he has looked great the first full week of practice. He's been probably one of the most consistent players out there on a day-to-day basis, but today might have been his best practice yet.
Yeah, and he spoke after at the podium after practice, and he talked about how the defense is becoming more comfortable with what Shane Bowen's asking them to do, and they're able to play more naturally with more instinct. Mm-hmm. And when I spoke to all the players on the Giants Huddle podcast and our player pods heading up to the camp, all the guys in the back end, the linebackers and the defensive back, said to me, we like this defense because it allows us to have eyes on the quarterback and react. On all 3 of these interceptions we talked about, Matt, it has not been guys in man-to-man coverage. It's been guys sitting in their zones, reading the quarterback, breaking on the ball, getting to where they need to go to knock the ball away. And it's because they have their eyes on the quarterback. They're trying to anticipate where they're going with the football. And I think we're seeing guys start to get used to their responsibilities and what Shane Bowen's asking them to do. And that's why, if you're choosing whether or not you're playing a heavy man-to-man scheme or a heavy zone scheme where you're watching the quarterback, the reason, if you decide to go this way, you would go with the heavy zone scheme is that you got your eyes on the quarterback, you got a better chance to make plays on the football, and that's what we saw a ton of today.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it throughout the first week of practice, but I think today especially, the whole defense, again, first, second, and third team, everyone just looks comfortable back there. We haven't seen many plays of just completely blown coverage or miscommunication and a guy is completely wide open down the field. That just has not really happened. The guys are, they are communicating well, which is important for any defense, but especially a new defensive system, which the Giants are, still implementing. Shane Bowen was only brought in 6 months ago.
Yep.
They haven't even obviously had actual game reps in this new defense. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Everyone just looks to be on the same page just about every single play out there.
Now it's important to see this against a different opponent because the defense can get used to what the offense is running. You're facing the same scheme. They've been facing the same plays since the spring. You start to anticipate a little bit more. Let's see what it looks like against the Lions when we do the joint practice this next week. Anything from practice, Matt, before we get to the coordinators?
Yeah, I did think Eric Gray also had a very good day today.
Nice catch on a little pass by the sideline.
He had a nice diving catch towards the sideline. Earlier in practice, he got around the edge very strong, hit the edge, and picked up a first down. And then towards the end of practice, this one was a little bit easier, but when the Giants had the ball down at the goal line, he punched it in for a touchdown from maybe the 1 yard line. Just good to see him have a good day. I feel like we haven't really spoken about him much, especially among all those other running backs, because some of the other guys have stood out.
Yeah, in fact, I think Tracy and Miller have made more big plays than he has through the first week and a half of camp.
Yeah, so it was just good to see him have just an overall strong day, both in the run game and as a pass catcher.
And to be clear, those 3 guys are really splitting reps.
Yeah.
I mean, all three have been with the ones. All three have been with the twos. They're kind of the only guy that's been with the ones almost exclusively has been Devin Singletary.
Yeah.
He might have gone a couple with Drew Lock and the twos, but he's primarily with the ones. The other three guys are. It really seems like a competition. They're splitting those reps evenly. All right,
Yeah.
let's get to. We already talked about Bobby Okereke at the podium. Nothing else from him really jumped out at me. We should talk about Greg Van Roten at the podium, which I think was interesting. Long Island guy, for the people that don't know, said he had some offers earlier in free agency to go to a different team, but none were. When he said stood out, my guessing nobody's willing to pay him a lot of money or guarantee him a starting spot. So he's like, look, me and my wife, they just had their first kid in December. His wife is from Long Island as well, so that's where they live in the off season. They wanted to wait for the right place to go play that makes sense for them. And he said he was thrilled the Giants came calling. And he said basically the reason he thinks the Giants are interested in him and wanted him here is that you can plug him in at left guard, right guard, and center. He started all three spots. In fact, he did some center stuff today. And they just feel comfortable plugging him in wherever they need him. They talked about now John Runyon's taking some snaps over at left guard rather than right guard, where he spent pretty much the entire spring in the early part of camp. And with Evan Neal, with no signs of him returning still, and I think at this point, Matt, until we hear otherwise, we should just operate as though he's not there, and we got to figure out what it's going to be. And when he gets back, then we'll adjust to it when he's back. But it gives the Giants some flexibility here with him, Runyon, and Stinney as to where you're going to play them when you try to figure out what that starting offensive line is going to look like.
Yeah, so Van Roten said he called it a natural fit here. And I think that is true for a multitude of reasons. I mean, you mentioned the versatility. Obviously, especially right now with John Michael Schmitz having not practiced the last couple of days, it's crucial and important to have a guy like Van Roten that during the season, if this happens, they know, all right, we can throw this guy in at center and we'll feel great about it. This guy could end up being a starting guard for us, but if something were to happen to John Michael Schmitz and we have to shuffle things around, we would feel comfortable throwing this guy in at center and the whole unit wouldn't miss a beat. So that's part one. Part two, you mentioned local guy. He said that his family, his wife, and his wife's family were probably happier that the Giants came calling than even he was, because as you mentioned, from Long Island, local guy, I think they were all very happy to have the family be able to stay in the area. That was great. And then perhaps the biggest reason why it was a natural fit is because of Carmen Brasillo. I mean, I feel like almost every day we talk about the offensive line and we have to bring up Carmen Brasillo, of course, but Van Roten said it himself that last year with the Las Vegas Raiders was the best season of his career. And that was playing under Carmen Brasillo, playing next to Jermaine Illuminor. And once John Michael Schmitz returns, there's a pretty good chance that Van Roten is slotted in at right guard, playing right next to Illuminor at right tackle, with Brasillo as the position coach again. Clearly, he loves Carmen Brasillo as a position coach, and it seems like the feelings are pretty mutual. I mean, I don't think the Giants bring Van Roten in unless Carmen Brasillo is on board with that move. So, yeah, he called it a natural fit, and just for three different reasons, it's easy to see why he was such a logical fit and just makes so much sense for the Giants.
There's no better place to watch live TV this fall than Hulu Plus Live TV. Why? Because you get your favorite sports like football, local channels, shows, and so much more. Plus, get Hulu's entire streaming library with Disney Plus and ESPN Plus included with your plan. No long-term contracts or hidden fees. Don't wait. Start your 3-day free trial of Hulu Plus Live TV today. Live TV plan required. Access content from each service separately. Offer valid for new and eligible returning subscribers only if available. Terms and restrictions apply. Learn more at hulu.com.
Yeah, no question about it. That's what I got out of the Van Roten as well. Tyler Nubin slowly working his way back into practice. Dexter Lawrence ramping up, continuing to. Micah McFadden was good to go today. He's the guy that's still kind of splitting those first team reps with Deontay Johnson a little bit. What else was there today from the coordinators? Brian Dable also spoke about very quickly. He did a little drive-by before he headed out to practice that John Michael Schmidt's still not back yet. We'll see. I'm getting concerned now that maybe he might not be able to participate in the joint practices next week against Detroit, which would be unfortunate because you're probably going to want him to ramp up a little bit after missing. He's fourth straight practice he's missed now, right?
Third or fourth.
Yeah. So if he doesn't come back tomorrow, you're looking at a week, right, with the 2 off days in there since he's practiced last. Then you only have 1 practice till the Lions get here. So I would like to have him there and the full line there together to, work on the twist and the stunts and the other things the Lions are going to throw at him. So I really would like to see Schmitz back on the practice field tomorrow. If not tomorrow, maybe they can get him on the field on Sunday in shells, ramp him up a little bit, and then he can do some of the team stuff against the Lions on Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, as we've spoken about at length, it would be great to get what we project to be the starting offensive line together, getting as many reps as possible. And especially when it comes to these joint practices, because every practice is important during training camp. But I don't think anyone would deny that when you're going up against another opponent and players that you haven't been facing, all offseason, the last couple of weeks, the start of training camp, it's just there's more juice on the field. Everyone is more juiced up. And those reps, I think they hold a slightly more importance and significance than just your normal day-to-day training camp reps. So, yeah, it would be great to get him back. Hopefully he's back on the field soon. Every time Dable is asked about it, he indicates that they don't think this is like a serious or long-term issue. So hopefully he will be back on the field sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that's the hope, certainly. We got the coordinators today, too. We'll touch on this before we get to your calls again at 201-939-4513. I don't know how yet to judge, Matt, what Shane Bowen and Michael Gabriel say, because you kind of have to listen to guys for a while to figure out what are throwaway lines, what aren't, how they describe things, how they talk about things. I did think both guys made a point that they thought all the players' recall was very good from the spring. They didn't have to really go over everything again, that they came back in shape. They were happy with it. And Gabriel just talked about how, as they even watched the first preseason game of the year tonight, they're looking forward to watching how teams work their kickoff scheme. And, I even asked him in the presser, I said, well, Coach, do you really think in these games teams are going to show what they're actually going to do in the regular season? He goes, he didn't really fully answer, but he goes, look, they do have to show what their kind of foundational ideas of how they're going to do it. And this is so new for everybody. Even getting that out of some of these game reps, and I'm sure with the live reps next week against the Lions, that's going to help trying to figure out exactly how they might have to adjust some of their schemes on these kickoff returns.
Yeah, he mentioned, I don't know who exactly he was referring to, but he mentioned that a group of guys were going to be watching the game together tonight to sort of go over and see how both of the teams, the Bears and the Texans, how they attack the new kickoff rules.
I think it was him and Pearson. We're going to sit down and watch together, actually.
So, yeah, and I think he also mentioned that, that they have, I don't know the number he said, but a ton of kickoff plays.
I think he said 50, but
50
he might have been throwing a number out
yeah,
there. Right.
But a large number of plays, up his sleeve that they're going to kind of toy with over this next month and sort of figure out when to use which specific plays. Like, this is new for everybody.
Yeah.
Everyone across the league. No one has ever partaken in these new kickoff rules. So this is going to be a learning curve from just about everyone across the league. The other thing that stood out to me from Gabriel's press conference was we don't really talk about the gunners too much on kickoff coverage. And he kind of just he was asked about Miles Boykin in particular, which is what led him down this path. But he gave Miles Boykin a shout out for the work he's been doing as a gunner. And he said how all the younger guys on special teams really kind of look up to him and see how he goes about doing his work every day on special teams as like the model way to do it. And on a similar note, he gave shout outs to Matthew Adams and Chris Manhertz for the same thing. So I wanted to give a little bit of gunner love because they don't really get talked about too much. And it's an important position.
I put Nick McLeod in that mix too. He's a vet that can play out there at gunner as well.
Yeah, of course. We've seen him do that the last couple of years here. Just wanted to give those veteran guys that have been, busting their tails on special teams, may not hear their names as much on offense or defense, but they've really been working hard on special teams, and that's a key position on special teams.
Yeah, the stuff from Bowen that I think is significant. We already talked about the Isaiah Simmons stuff. He basically said that the cornerback spot is a wide open competition, inside and outside, like flat out. Like, it's great competition there. We'll see what happens. He's like that. Flada's come back a little bit stronger. this year. I think he's played pretty well out there. Nick McLeod, you can tell these coaches love Nick McLeod. Like they feel they can put him anywhere. He's going to help. He's a good player. Like if you want to pencil somebody into the 53-man roster right now, you can pencil Nick McLeod, and he's going to be on this team. It's just a matter of where they end up playing him. He was asked a lot about individual players, and this is when I talk about trying to figure out what these coaches' code is. And he kind of talked about how a guy came out and was playing well the same way for like 3 different guys. He kind of gave the same stock response. So I don't know how much to take out of those because, when you answer the same exact way for 3 different players, doesn't mean he's not being honest, but it just means that he's giving his, he's done a good job. So he was asked specifically about Deontay Johnson. He gave that answer on, right? Flott was the other guy I think he gave that answer on, and maybe Dane Belton I think was the third guy he might have given that answer on. So he's been I'm trying to figure out with Bowen, because there are some coaches that have been here where you ask them about any player and they say, oh yeah, he's doing a good job. And they'll say that about no matter what the thing is. So I'm still trying to feel Bowen out in terms of how he talks about his players in the defense a little bit.
Yeah, you got to figure out what's just coach speak.
Yeah, correct.
And what's, what's for real. But I thought the one thing he said about Dane Belton, which was different from all those other guys, is he really complimented Dane Belton.
Spouts your Dane Belton propaganda, Matt Citak. Citak loves him some Dane Belton.
I do love Dane Belton. The guy is just a ball magnet. Limited snaps first 2 years and has like 7 total takeaways. But it seems like from what Shane Bowen said before, he seems to agree because
he did say that.
He has said, obviously, Tyler Nubin has not been practicing. Today was his first practice back. And so Dane Belton has been getting pretty much all of those reps with Jason Pinnock in the secondary. And he said that Belton has just taken ownership of that safety spot. He said, and this was his exact words, were, it is Dane Belton's job to lose, which that I thought was
he did say that
pretty significant because obviously Tyler Nubin is a second-round pick. We all saw Hard Knocks. Like clearly the coaching staff is very high on Tyler Nubin, as they should be. But Dane Belton has, taken this opportunity he's gotten at the beginning of training camp, and he has run with it. And clearly he's caught in the eye of Shane Bowen in this first week.
No question about it. All right, 201-939-4513. Don't forget, guys, go subscribe to the Giants Huddle podcast. A lot of long-form interviews on there. Reporters coming out of camp, Giants alumni. We have the interview coming up on Friday with the producers of the Giants Hard Knocks episode. That's going to hit tomorrow morning. Go check that out. The reaction from Matt and I from the Hard Knocks episode, was that 6? Was that the last episode?
5.
5. That's up there too, so go check that out. We have some with reporters coming up next week. We'll have some season preview stuff. A lot of good stuff on the Giants Huddle podcast, Giants.com, Giants app, or just search for Giants Huddle on your favorite podcast platform. And let's get to the calls, and I'll get to some more business a little bit later. 201-939-4513. Let's go to Jay in Phoenix. Jay, you're up next on Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Hey guys, thanks for the updates from camp. Really appreciate these at the beginning. I'm following it in different podcasters and on some other websites and stuff like that. But you guys do a real nice job of kind of a quick summary of how things have gone. So appreciate that.
No problem.
Yeah, and one of the things as you've listened to practice reports and things like that, I'd like to try and keep things in perspective and maybe help other fans too. It's okay that it's up and down. It is practice. They are trying new things. I like hearing early on that the the receivers were really playing very well and the cornerbacks were struggling, and then the cornerbacks came back the next day and had a good day. It's good to hear that back and forth there. It's good to see them take what they've learned from getting beat the day before and applying it and winning the next day. I think that's a good flow actually versus, oh my gosh, the sky is falling because every throw and every play is not perfect. It's football. I mean, having played the game, it's football. Nothing's perfect in practice. And then one thing, my question for you guys is I'm looking at the offensive side of the ball when it comes to who's going to make the roster and things like that. I am struggling to understand, and I don't think we're going to be able to do this. How do we keep 3 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, and 4 tight ends? As you're hearing the reports and things like that, you're like, oh, I don't want to lose Tommy to waivers.
I'll stop you. I'll stop you quick. I don't think you're keeping 4 running backs.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because now you're talking Dante Miller. It's not going to be Tracy, and it's not going to be Singletary. So you're talking Eric Gray or Dante Miller, and Dante Miller sounds like he's been explosive. And then the tight ends, I mean, you love hearing about Chris Manhertz, but you heard how high they were in Cager. And I can't imagine they're looking to cut Bellinger, so it's probably going to be Bellinger, Johnson. And then are they going to keep two more? Are they going to only keep one?
And by the way, Jay, real quick, Jack
numbers.
Stoll has had a pretty good summer too, to be honest with you. I think him and Manhertz are in competition.
Yeah, and you guys said that today he had a good day. So that's I'm like trying to mentally juggle how they're all going to how they possibly could keep all those guys, and I don't think they can. We're going to lose some good players.
And that's a good thing, by the way, Jay, because we've gone through a lot of these cut down processes where you struggle to find the guys you want to keep. It's a lot better to be in a situation where you're struggling to lose guys that you want to keep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. The only other concern I just wanted to bring up was I am, looking at the offensive line. I'm excited about Greg Van Roten. I think he's a perfect fit, with his experience with Brasillo next to a Luminor, solid vet. I think he's going to be good on the other side of Schmitz. But, man, I still just feel like we need some more depth there. It's concerning, to hear John Michaels hurt. Hopefully he won't be bad, but, I mean, it sounds like we need a little depth at center and tackle. As much as I love Evan Neal, or not love him, I hope that he's successful. I just feel like, I don't know if Tyree Phillips is still out there, how he's doing with his recovery. I know he's no longer a Giant player, but, man, I would love to see another tackle maybe come in.
Yeah, his agent tweeted something maybe a week or two ago or something like that about how he's close to being ready. Tyree Phillips' agent or something like that. I vaguely remember that. I'm not sure you're gonna find out with that search because he vaguely mentioned it with a number or something like that. I don't think he mentioned him by name, but he should be getting close to healthy at this point. If the Giants do decide they need a swing tackle, they could always go that route, or maybe they Matt Nelson's here. He's been a swing guy. Azudu was a third-round pick. He's been playing both right and left tackle. He'd be the guy right now. If you're considering Neal hurt and you're not talking about him right now, I would consider right now Azudu to be your swing, right?
Yeah, right now without Neal, Azudu would probably be the swing. I've just found this tweet from about 2 weeks ago. His agent said that he's been training in Dallas, this is Tyree Phillips, and that he should be full go by mid-August.
Yep,
so
I know something like
2
that.
weeks from now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, again, he's still out there, so that's a situation where once he's fully healthy, who knows? I mean, Tyree Phillips played well when he was here, but, we got to worry about the guys that are here. We can't worry about potential, additions down the road. Yeah.
No, I hear you. I just throwing that name out there just because we know him, and he actually has performed pretty well.
No, he has. You're right about that.
Yeah, but I will say after the addition of Van Roten, it makes me feel a little bit better about the interior line because Aaron Stinney, he's looked good the first week.
Interior, sure. I think his concern is tackle.
The tackles. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Azudu, yeah, you're right. He's probably the swing tackle as of now. I mean, again, hopefully Evan Neal's back sooner rather than later. I guess Matt Nelson has
another guy.
He's
Yadni Kajust and then Miles, right?
Miles has had a couple of good practices, so we'll have to see how it pans out. There's still a month to go before final cutdown day, so a lot can change.
And Jay, I will say, generally speaking, watching the offensive line, I feel like they've been much more solid and consistent than what we've seen in previous camps. But again, you're not going to get a real test, and I always say this, and I'm being honest, folks, good and bad. You're not going to have a real test until you take on the Lions next week in those joint practices. And then when those are over, I'm going to say, we're not going to get a real test until you get to the first regular season game. So, or if you get starters in a preseason game for an extended period of time, which I'm not quite sure I'll ever get that in the current day and age of the NFL. But, Jay, that's kind of where we're at right now.
Well, I do think the preseason game could be, beneficial because while we may not see the starters play that much, it'll be, backups who are still fighting for spots going up against guys in the same exact position on other teams. So
sure.
I do think it could help us get a better sense of who some of the reserves could end up being towards the bottom of the roster.
And I think that Houston game, because there are no joint practices that week leading up to that game, if you're going to get extended time from starters, I bet it would be that game. Would be my guess.
I agree with that.
Can I squeeze one more in
Sure.
about the defensive line real quick? So next to Dexter, who have you guys been? I know you heard everybody's kind of playing in there, but who's kind of standing out? And also, is Boogie Basham playing in that position?
Yeah, a little bit.
Down lineman, or is he more outside?
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate the call. Yeah, Boogie has reduced down into that pass rush spot on third downs a bit. Actually, that was one thing Shane Bowen was asked about today that we did not mention. It was a good question from the media. Maybe Dan Duggan asked it about on third down, as you're trying to figure out who the three technique is going to be, would you consider just sliding Azeez, Kayvon, or Burns in there? And he goes, look, we haven't really worked on that yet. Maybe down the road that's something we can consider. But he says right now he's pretty happy with the defensive line, the interior guys, and how they've played. He thinks it's gonna be a real good competition there. And he said even it's going to be tough to – you might have to cut a good player at that spot when all is said and done. So he said he wants to see how the interior guys kind of work that out themselves first before you talk about reducing one of those three big-time pass rushers, Thibodeau, Ojulari, or Burns down there. But Basham is a guy that has taken snaps outside, inside. I think Basham's actually had a pretty good summer. He's been in the backfield a decent amount with that second team.
Yeah, he's made some plays. Jordan Riley, he's made some plays in the first week. Jordan Phillips, the veteran of the guys fighting for that spot next to Dex.
Nacho and DJ Davidson have made a couple plays too.
Nacho, I feel like we always forget about Nacho, but I think he's had a very good start to his training camp.
He's flashed to me more in the run game than the pass game,
yeah, for sure.
But he's made some plays, and DJ Davidson has flashed some power too. Remember, they liked him a lot when they picked him in the 5th round a couple years ago. Last year he was coming back off the ACL injury. You hope now 2 years off he can show some of that promise that they had for him when they drafted him.
I think it's just a little easier to recognize when Nacho makes a play because he makes sure everyone on the field knows that he just made the play.
You ain't wrong.
So I think that's why he stood out to me a little bit more.
Absolutely.
But yeah, Shane Bowen did say that before he really considers moving, because the question I think was about Azeez potentially playing in that interior spot next to Dex on passing downs, like third passing downs. And he said, look, before we even consider that, I want to see how the competition for the spot next to Dex, how it plays out. He's like, we have a couple weeks here. We've had some guys, flash at times, other guys flash at other times. And before we, sort of set up that, NASCAR pass rush where you have the three edges in Dexter, he wants to give the interior guys a chance to really earn that spot. And as we've said, some of those guys have shown flashes of playing well. It could end up being a situation where there isn't one guy that is the guy that plays next to Dexter most of the downs. It could be somewhat of a rotation, and a sort of, I feel we really talk about this more in basketball than football, but sort of like a hot hand approach. I wouldn't be, obviously that's, it may not be ideal, but I wouldn't be surprised given who the Giants have for that second spot if it is sort of just a rotation. Nacho on rundowns, I don't even want to say some of the others because we don't even know who's going to end up making the team. But I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being somewhat of a rotation in that spot next to Dexter.
I agree with that. I'm with you on that. And I'll just say this, and you guys know I'm a fan of the player. I was when they drafted him. I had a first-round grade on him. If Azeez Ojulari stays healthy, he's going to be a good pass rusher this year. He's in the backfield a lot. He's got burst. He's got bend. He's got speed on the edge. If he can just stay healthy, I think he could have a pretty big role in an important year for the Giants in 2024. 201-939-4513. You can run or walk with Giant Legends. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K racing kids run presented by Quest on Saturday, September 7th at 9 a.m. at MetLife Stadium. It's part of the Giants Big Fan Fest weekend. The Fan Fest is that Friday night. We have the run on the 7th and, of course, the home opener on the 8th against the Vikings. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative T-shirt. And after the race, stay for a festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at Giants.com/5K. Let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Aiden in New Jersey. He's up next. Hi, Aiden.
Hi, how's it going?
We're good.
What's up, Aiden?
Okay, so I watched the last episode of Hard Knocks last night. I also listened to the huddle you guys did, and I see both the Giants. The Giants. I see they're pretty high on Theo Johnson, and I also saw that Brian Dable was showing him videos of Gronk and saying this is what we want out of you. And this guy's a 4th rounder, and right now I see Bellinger's the tight end one, and even that Bellinger is more of a blocking tight end. And like I was wondering what you think of like this guy, like what his potential is, especially like as a fourth rounder.
I think he can grow into being a good two-way player and a wide tight end, which means he can be an inline blocker and be a receiver. Aiden, tight ends in year one as two-way players, it's just really tough for them. You don't see guys thrive unless you're just a straight-up receiving tight end where you're going to just split out wide and go run routes and catch the ball all the time, which that's not the player Theo Johnson is. It's very hard because of all the things they have to learn and adjust to at the NFL level for a fourth-round rookie tight end to come in and be a huge difference maker right away. He has the size at 6'6", 260. He has the athleticism, just looks at his athletic testing. You know, Matt and I were on earlier in the week. We talked about his RAS score, or that was on, I think, the Hard Knocks Reaction podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he checks all those boxes, but, Matt, we've seen it with rookie tight ends. There's just so much thrown on their plates, asking a lot out of them, especially a day 3 pick. In year one's asking a lot, but I think down the road he could be a really, really good player.
Yeah, I think this year, especially because of the season that Sam Laporta had last year.
And Kincaid. Both of them.
And Kincaid, yeah, but really, especially Laporta, it sort of had some people, like, expectations have been risen for rookie tight ends, when in reality, that is one of the tougher positions to transition from college to the NFL because, and we've spoken about this for the past few months, in college, tight ends are asked to do such a wide variety of things where it really varies depending on what school you're at, the program, the offense that they're running. So I wouldn't say, like, I think Theo Johnson could grow into the starting tight end here. I think he could develop into a tight end capable of having a good, solid, long career. But I wouldn't raise expectations that high for him as a rookie. Like, he has shown flashes. He's had some great catches throughout the first week, showed it a little bit in the spring as well, but you don't want to raise expectations too high for a rookie tight end.
Yeah, I remember that. Like, everybody thought Evan Ingram was going to be the franchise, like, tight end for the Giants after his rookie year, and then he ended up being banged up by injuries, and he was just never the same player after his rookie year with the Giants.
Well, I mean, look, and the shame of it is, I think if the Giants could do a redo here, I think Evan Ingram would still be here. Unfortunately, when they got to the point of when they let him go to Jacksonville, they were really up against it with the salary cap. They did not have a lot of money to spend. Quite frankly, the fan base had soured on him a little bit. I mean, remember the Bronx cheer after that one game? Just during the one game, like it just got a little rough, and Evan did have some key drops in key situations, but he was always a good player and frankly a great dude. And I wish he was still here. He's had a lot of success. He just got a big contract extension in Jacksonville. He had 100 catches last year, right?
He had 114 catches last year and made the Pro Bowl. He's turned into
exactly what they thought he was going to be when they drafted him.
Exactly, and it's unfortunate that it's in Jacksonville and not here. But I mean, we wish Evan nothing but the best.
And again,
always such a nice guy.
That wasn't not liking Evan Ingram. That was just the circumstances that offseason, I think, working against bringing him back. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and what I'm really hoping Theo Johnson, fourth round. I feel like it's been a very long time that the Giants have had a tight end last more than 5 years. Frankly.
Yeah, they've had some young guys, and they didn't appreciate the call. Yeah, it's kind of been a position where you've been in and out with a lot of players. The last really, even a guy like Kevin Boss is only here for a few years before the concussions, ended his career. Otherwise, he's right. You go Martellus Bennett, Larry Donnell, Darren Waller. I'm trying to think what other tight ends were in that mix during some of those down years. But you've really never more than a couple of seasons was a tight end here. They've cycled through a lot of guys. Aiden's not wrong about that.
Yeah, he's 100% right. And obviously, I think everyone in the building, coaching staff, front office, everyone is hoping that Theo Johnson is that guy that will lock down the position for years to come. And he could end up being that guy. I just think he's a rookie in his first week of training camp. And you don't want to set the bar too high right away for a rookie tight end.
Nope.
I think he can eventually develop into that guy, but let's just give him a little time before we start, expecting him to be that guy.
There's no better place to watch live TV this fall than Hulu Plus Live TV. Why? Because you get your favorite sports like football, local channels, shows, and so much more. Plus, get Hulu's entire streaming library with Disney Plus and ESPN Plus included with your plan. No long-term contracts or hidden fees. Don't wait. Start your 3-day free trial of Hulu Plus Live TV today. Live TV plan required. Access content from each service separately. Offer valid for new and eligible returning subscribers only if available. Terms and restrictions apply. Learn more at hulu.com.
Giant fans, take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2024 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. James in Georgia. James, haven't heard from you in a while, man. What's going on?
What's going on, guys? Yeah, been on day shift, so y'all come on. I'm literally going back to work from lunch, but
all good, man. What's up?
Early today. Nothing much. Just want to talk about Hard Knocks and expound on the last caller, because he hit on a good point with how much depth we have. So the question I was thinking in regards to that, if we have this good problem to have, is there somebody you see or on the roster that we can use as trade bait, or say the third guy and the fourth guy are real close? A team needs somebody, you would trade the third guy and keep the fourth guy. Is there a situation like that on our team, or do we just keep who we keep because other teams know you're going to cut somebody anyway? You know what I mean? Do you try to trade somebody in that situation, or do teams know you're going to cut one of them anyway, so that nobody's going to trade with you? You know what I mean? How does that work? And then I got some on the Hard Knocks.
Yeah. Well, I think just I get exactly what you're asking, but I think it's just tough to really make that determination before we even get into the preseason games. The guys that end up getting traded, other than, a guy like Isaiah Simmons or Boogie Basham, who were pretty big name players that maybe didn't live up to those expectations those first couple of years with their old team. For the type of guys I feel like you're talking about, other teams are going to want to wait to see them do it in actual game situations.
If there was a position, Matt, that you think most likely where the Giants could have an abundance and an excess where they could maybe find a trade partner, what position would you look at? I don't need you to name players, just a position.
I feel like it would be wide receiver. And I think that because the guys that are battling for those bottom of the roster, bottom of the depth chart spots, you have multiple guys that are very similar to each other.
Yeah.
Guys like Gunnar and Isaiah McKenzie are pretty similar. Isaiah Hodgins, Allen Robinson, Miles Boykin, those are pretty similar receivers. So I could see a situation where, if two of those guys in the same group both have great preseason games, great in training camp reps and stuff, could I see another team potentially reaching out to the Giants ahead of cut down day, being like, hey, we'll give you a late round pick? It could happen. I wouldn't expect it to happen. I think it definitely could, especially if you're one of those contending teams that are pretty far down the waiver wire, and okay, if this guy hits the waiver wire, there's no chance that he's dropping all the way to us. That could be a situation where I could see the Giants maybe being able to flip a guy like that for some, late pick, or maybe it's, we've seen this a couple of times years ago. They flipped a player for a player. I mean, I remember we traded B.J. Hill in the deal for Billy Price.
For the center, yep.
Ben Bredesen, was he just for a pick, or was there a player we sent?
I think that might have been a pick. I think that was a pick.
Well, I think there might have been one other player for player trade
sometime
in the last couple of years.
I remember that.
So, yeah, could it happen? Yeah, but I wouldn't expect anything like that to happen till a little bit later into training
camp.
And
James, I wouldn't mess with my depth on the offensive line. I wouldn't mess with my depth on the defensive line or at edge. Because those are spots where you want guys there that can rotate on defense, and Lord knows you don't want an issue on the offensive line with running out of depth. So I think to Matt's point, and frankly, and we all know corner is a spot where they're figuring things out. So I think that would be the logical spot. What's your question on Hard Knocks? James, you have to turn your radio down. What's your question on Hard Knocks?
Oh, I was just gonna make a couple.
All right, James, call back if you want to get your Hard Knocks point in. You can. We did not hang up on him, just for the record. I don't know why he turned up his radio as he was on the call. That was a new one. Let's go to Jeff in Rhode Island. He's up next. Jeff, what's going on?
Hey, Johnny, Matt, how you guys doing today?
We're good, man. How are you?
How you doing, Jeff?
Good. Hanging in there. The one position group that kind of scares me right now is the running back room, seeing as we only have one proven commodity back there. The rest of the guys are virtually all prospects. So that has me a little bit concerned going into camp, and also with the lack of having a thumper in there, too, as well.
If there is a position you want to be young at, though, Jeff, that would be the position. I would be concerned if, Singletary's to miss some amount of time, things like pass pro and things like that, to make sure these guys are ready to go with that part of the running back position, which can be tough. But I understand what you're saying.
I will say, though, about the running backs, that is the one position where there are still a lot of guys out there available.
Who's around?
This first name scares me a little bit, but like Dalvin Cook is available. Latavius Murray, who seems to have drank from the fountain of youth, and the fact that he's still be able to compete the way he does. Kareem Hunt. Matt Breida, who's here for a while, he's still a free agent. So that is a position where,
I think Hunt got signed by the Browns.
Are you sure? I don't think so.
Says current team Cleveland Browns on the Google search.
That was his last team, but I'm pretty sure he's still available.
Oh,
look at that first article. 3 potential running backs for the Browns to target.
Okay.
To pursue.
Yeah.
So that's just my point being, like, John is right that is a position where you do want to have some relative youth, because as you know, that is a position where as you get older, guys tend to quote unquote fall off the cliff pretty quickly. But as we get into these preseason games, if that group doesn't compete to where the coaching staff and front office want them or expect them to,
you're right.
That is a position where there are still guys sitting around waiting for a call, where they could turn to a free agent still waiting to help fill out the room.
I would think by the time all is said and done, they'll probably add a veteran. I would think, simply because, as I said, there's only one experienced guy there. And another question I had, I know it's rather early and you haven't seen a lot, but I was wondering how Darian Beavers is moving around out there.
He's moving fine. He's been with that second and third group, depending on the practice. He's a guy that's going to be fighting for a roster spot.
I think if Paul, it's unfortunate Paul's not here today, because Darian Beavers is certainly one of Paul's guys.
Well, the problem with Paul is that if you put all the guys he likes on the roster, it'd be a 65-man roster. Some guys, even if you like him, they just can't make it. It's just the way it goes.
But Beavers has made some plays. He's broken up a couple of passes. He's had some good coverage. But yeah, as John mentioned, it's unfortunate he had that injury he did. Was it 2 years ago now?
Yeah, as a rookie.
Because that first training camp he had as a rookie, he looked explosive. He looked really, really good. And it takes guys sometimes a while to come back from a torn ACL. So maybe once he gets into some game action, we start seeing the Darian Beavers that we saw that first training camp.
Yeah. And in regards to the Lions, next week, Monday and Tuesday, are they actually going to scrimmage against each other, or is it just going to be like drills, or what's up with that?
There won't be a official scrimmage where they run a clock and play like almost like a fake game, but you're going to have competitive one-on-one drills, competitive team drills. Okay. So even though it's not a scrimmage per se, Jeff, you're going to get a lot of good competition.
Yeah, I'd expect it to be sort of run similar to the practices that we've seen here the past week. There obviously could be some changes based on what Detroit and their coaching staff like to do.
Just go back to the practices last year between the two teams. Yeah, that's what it's going to look like.
A lot of the individual drills will be like, Giants wide receivers versus Detroit cornerbacks, and vice versa, and then the team drills will be 11 on 11 with both team offense and defense going at each other.
Good. Well, I hope to be able to see some good clips of that action. So, okay, guys, thank you. I'll be in touch.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And don't forget, Giant social media platforms. We'll make sure that we have all those plays up there if anything happens.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure you check it out.
Every good play that happens in practice finds its way to the Giants' Twitter account.
Twitter, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. Anything else I'm missing there?
I think that covers it.
Is Reels a thing, or is that not a thing anymore? What's Reels? That was a thing.
Instagram Reels is a thing.
Is that a thing? Okay.
It is a thing, yeah.
Okay. So maybe there?
Just check the Giants' social platforms. You'll find them.
I'm not the social media expert. All right, James joins us again. James, what's your Hard Knocks point, my friend? You got about 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. What do you got?
No worries.
Oh, I just wanted to make a couple comments and observations. The editing was really good because, they made Joe Shane and them look like, I know the preparation and the plan that they went with in the draft was spot on because, they stuck to their board, and you always like to see that. You know what I mean? Sometimes taking the best player available doesn't always translate to the fans sometimes, and we got what, our general manager and scout team kind of put together the last 24 hours before the draft, and that was really cool to see. What y'all said yesterday about Daniel Jones getting the ball out there, they showed a couple of clips, good clips where Neighbors made a couple of catches, but like I said, if they would have went more into the off season, it would have kind of bled into the show that I guess Cleveland is about to do, which is Hard Knocks.
Chicago.
Whatever.
Yeah, Chicago.
Chicago, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And then my observation was, I think I cut off right before I made it, Brian Daboll loves to put his feet up on Joe Shane's desk.
Well, that isn't Joe Shane's desk. That's the table in Joe Shane's room. Right.
Office. Right. Still, same. Not his desk, but the table in his office. Like, it doesn't matter if, the President of the United States or your next draft pick is in the room, Brian Daboll is throwing his feet up on that table,
He's chilling, man. Look, James, that's you, Brian. Brian Daboll is authentically himself. That's what he is, man.
And that's cool, that's cool to see, and the ripping back and forth they gave him at the combine and all that stuff. So I think they did a really good job on Hard Knocks and the 100th season and all. But like you're saying, if I could do one last point, like you're saying, sometimes Daniel Jones, I've been saying this for a couple of years, you just got to throw the ball out there and let it rip. And either you're gonna overthrow somebody like Hyatt, or Hyatt's gonna be the only one to catch it because he's outrunning everybody else,
Yeah, James, no question about it. Appreciate the call, my friend. Good stuff. And again, if you want more, if you want more in the Hard Knocks, James, go check out the John Tuttle podcast coming out on Friday. I talked to the two producers of the spring series, which I think you get some really good, interesting stuff out of them on that. Do you guys think I should start hosting the show with my feet up on the table? Do you think fans will like that? You can show off the legs.
I do love every time he sat down. There?
No.
Every time he sat down on that couch, I was like, that's how I sit down when I get home from work.
He looks so right. He
just slouch and put the feet up on the table. It's great.
And I've seen people on Twitter criticize him for that, being like, how could you do that with these prospects in the building? And I'm like, I see these comments. I'm like,
really?
Give me a break. Like, come on.
That he's complaining about?
Well, people complain about anything.
You read too many comments.
I guess I do. But these were NFL reporters tweeting this. No. I saw. I'll have to find it when we're done.
I don't even want to see it because it's so dumb.
I saw that and I'm like, that's just the Daves that we know. Like, we've seen him around the building. Like, he's himself. And that's what I want to see out of my head coach.
It's also guys, it's also a way to disarm the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
If you want to make the person you're talking to relax to get the real deal, not scripted answers from them, you don't sit them down in front of a table like this and you sit like this and you go, all right, I'm going to ask you questions about football now. No, you want to relax, get them to relax, let their proverbial, not in Brian Daboll's case or mine, hair down a little bit, and get them to just be themselves, to get to know them a little bit. You do that by relaxing and having a casual conversation, not by, let's talk about football now, and in front of a desk with a screen. And the one thing I was annoyed by, the way, and I think I forgot to mention this on the episode we did after the quarterbacks all came in. There was one scene where Daboll, I believe, was in Shane's office. I think it was Drake May, and they're like, "All right, you want to come down to my office and we'll watch tape in my office together and break it down." Drake May's like, "Yeah," and you see him walking down the hallway, and then you don't see it. And I'm like, "Oh, come on! I wanted to see that! And they kind of cut away from it, and they never got back to it. Anyway.
Those parts of Hard Knocks where we saw, Brian Daboll actually go, or any of the position coaches actually going over film with the prospects, whether it was, a top 30 visit or at the Combine, or even that clip we saw of Theo Johnson where it looked like it might have been the Senior Bowl. Like, I thought that was by far just the coolest part of the entire show. Yeah, that is stuff that is stuff that we never see, even in these Giants Life, which has been a great show that we put together the last couple of years. Like shows like that, which so many teams across the league now do, you don't actually get to see that part of those interviews.
You get the conversation, but you don't get the breakdown.
Yeah, which honestly, at the end of the day, that's the sort of stuff that should matter the most when it comes to drafting these guys.
But also the stuff teams don't want you to see.
Well, exactly. So the fact that we got to see it for the first time, I thought that was just so awesome.
And it was, short bursts, so you don't give anything away. And
of course.
Put them in. And that was the one thing, talking to the film's producers, it'll be the last thing I say before we wrap it up here. When I asked them, like, how did you figure out and the back and forth of what gets in and what doesn't? And the big point they made is that, and they said, look, this is something we learn from the stuff we do in the summer, even though show's a little bit different. The one overriding principle that remained consistent, and we do talk about the differences in terms of how they figured out what teams would be more lenient to put in and what they wouldn't. The one thing they said stuck and counted from what they did in the summer to what they did in the spring for the offseason, you don't want to put the team you're covering at any sort of competitive disadvantage. Do you show something that would give another team, even just showing how you might evaluate a position? Well, then maybe in next year's draft, if a team's picking 17th, the Giants are picking 16th, a team wants a tight end, they can go back and say, well, on Hard Knocks, Joe Shane says he likes tight ends that are this particular size, or, something as basic as that. Well, then they might know, okay, well, we don't think the Giants are going to take this 240-pound tight end. They only want 260-pound tight ends. And that could put the team at a competitive disadvantage, even in something like that. So when they were deciding what goes in and what doesn't, they were trying to avoid anything that might put the Giants, and Giant fans should care about this, at a competitive disadvantage, whether eventually on the field when they play games or even when teams are strategizing in terms of making trades with the Giants, what free agents the Giants might want to go after, who they might want to draft, how they scout, what they value. You have to worry about things like that to not, frankly, put the Giants at a disadvantage with teams they're competing against, even for free agents and in the draft.
Oh, so you're saying it wasn't just the Giants that decided, oh, this stays in, this goes out, this stays in, this goes out, which plenty of people on Twitter were saying that's exactly what happened.
Wait, what do you mean? That no other team in Hard Knocks has had that privilege?
Again, me reading too many comments of people. I saw a lot of people being like, oh, the Giants, they decided to cut that out. They decided to show this, but they didn't show that. And it's like, no, like Hard Knocks, they've been doing this obviously for years now. Granted, this was a different version of Hard Knocks, but the same rules apply. As you just said, they're not going to do anything that's going to put the Giants at a competitive disadvantage. So, again, you're right. I got to stop reading some of these comments.
And by the way, we do talk about that. And again, this is a good tease for the episode tomorrow. What the back and forth was like, the type of stuff they put in, what was it like working with them together to make this happen. All that's in there. I try to ask as many tough questions. And even at the end, I go rapid fire. I go, guys, can I throw some fan conspiracy theories at you? They say, okay. So I threw like 4 fan conspiracy theories at them that hopefully will, not that these people are going to listen to reason, but I do try to ask the questions that some of you guys wanted me to ask, so I did my best. All right, that's Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. For all of our great content, go download Giants TV, our connected TV streaming app. It has all our content on it, game highlights on demand. It's free, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and the Giants mobile app. For Pearson Butler, for Matthew Citak, I am John Schmeelk. Tomorrow it is Dottino and Cross for Friday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. And then next Monday, we'll cover everything that happened over the weekend practices, and we'll get you ready for Giants and Lions joint practices right here at the Quest Diagnostics Training Center. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody.
Todos ganan en el Mystery Sale de JCPenney. Apresúrate a la tienda de jueves a domingo para la entrega de cupones dorados mientras duren. Podrías ahorrar 30, 40 o hasta 50% extra. Y si eres súper suertudo, podrías obtener la oferta Jackpot y ahorrar $60 en tu compra de 60 o más. JCPenney. Vale la pena. Entrega de cupones solo en la tienda para mayores de 18 años. Cupón válido del 1 al 4 de agosto en selección de estilos. Aplican exclusiones. Detalles en la tienda.